David Tulis.
As I was saying, the power of contract is that upon contract that can be enforced in court, you have the free market. You have the certainty of investment. You have a way of securing capital, of securing income streams that allow your business to prosper and expand, serving new people, new markets, new areas, and increasing your efficiency as you get better in your field. Countries that don't have reliable courts, don't have reliable legal systems, cannot in the end prosper. And you find countries like that in the Far East, India, African countries have very unstable courts and very shaky legal systems. In our country, ours is shaky as well, but there are some things that are more or less still intact in the common law tradition of the enforceability of contract, and that those contracts are enforceable if there's a dispute in chancery or circuit court, sometimes in U.S. district court as well. Now, in Chattanooga, there's a contract that has been let staffing on Cherokee Boulevard, run by a local man, Rusty Hall, and in that tranquil arrangement, suddenly that has been re-upped year after year. Suddenly, there is a competitor, if you will, and that is one promoted by Mayor Andy Burke's administration, MSI Staffing, run by very favorite people of his, J. Marty Lowe, and his wife, Donna Christian Lowe, both people of high regard. Okay, she is she's on the mayor's women's council, so she's a very important person, has a lot of the right ideas, right? But now the relationship between Outsource and the city corporation is uncertain. And the city council will be talking about it next Tuesday. It didn't come up yesterday, though there has been a bit of press about this conflict. We have on the phone Rusty Hall. Rusty, just fill my listener in about what you're providing for the city at Outsource Staffing.
What was the question again? Sorry.
What is it that you're providing the city through your business, Outsource Staffing?
We provide temporary labor help and support for multiple departments within the city of Chattanooga.
What kind of people have you engaged for that purpose?
We've helped people or helped the departments find anywhere from just summer help at the summer camps, where we've got kids that need summer jobs, so we help them find summer jobs within the youth and family development centers, and at their summer camps. We also help people find jobs in the city garages, in the city offices, just multiple locations within the city departments.
So some is labor and some is administrative.
Yes.
How many people are we talking about?
75 to 100 people.
Now, your business is a small one. How many workers do you have, let's say, maximum going out into the labor marketplace in the area?
Usually between 150 to 200.
So City of Chattanooga's contract is your largest client. That is your largest bit of business.
Yes, sir. Yes.
And how long have you had this been in this relationship with the city?
11 years. We've been working with them since 2006.
How did your company get the business in the first place? Were there competitive bids back 11 years ago, and is there a competitive process? Because there are quite a few staffing services in Chattanooga.
Yes, so they put the contract out to bid, and back in 2006, and I bid just along with several other companies and was awarded the contract, I think because I was the lowest bidder at that point.
And do you have to rebid the job every year, Rusty?
Yes, so it's typically a 12-month contract with 1 to 2 renewals, and then it comes back up for rebid. And so I have been successful in rebidding it for the past 11 years. And
you're making money. You have the lowest bid, so you get the contract, and you're making enough money in the way of profit to maintain that low price. I mean, you have to be sustainable through profit, and so you have enough profit coming to you to say I'm strong enough to maintain my business and by my profit, and I'm going to do it another year. So that's how you've been keeping that business.
Correct. Yes, we are a small, locally owned. We do not have a lot of overhead, from a major corporation or anything like that, or regional staffing company, so we are able to provide a good service at very reasonable rates.
Well, how many pages is the contract, and what is the dollar figure on it, Rusty Hall?
The contract, this latest proposal was about a 30-page, maybe a little more proposal, and it was the dollar amount on the contract was $1.8 million.
And is that figure all money in your pocket, Rusty?
No, sir. No. Along with that, out of that, we pay the wages to the employees. We pay their taxes. We pay the Social Security matching, workers' comp insurance, unemployment insurance, liability insurance. I mean, there's a lot of other expense that comes out of that. So no, that is not a figure that comes to my pocket.
In the building you work in Cherokee Boulevard, is that one you own, or do you pay a note on that?
We pay rent here.
Okay, so rent, light bill, you're paid wages too, right?
Yes.
As you're an employee of your own company.
Yes.
Okay, so in the end, the marketplace says, okay, Rusty, you've gotten this deal, and if you keep your expenses low and provide that service, you make a profit, and it's satisfactory enough for you to stay in business, right? One more year.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, well, let me ask you about the uproar in City Hall over this matter. How do you see? I know you don't want to be disparaging. You told me earlier you don't want to be disparaging of the competition, but how do you see this conflict? Give my listener a quick narrative of what's happened that seems to be upending this relationship with city government by contract.
Yeah. So my contract came up for renewal last September, and I was sent a renewal letter from purchasing department with the city of Chattanooga, which I signed. It was a 12-month renewal. 3 weeks later, they called me back and told me that they needed to change that renewal to a 6-month renewal because they wanted to get the contract lined up with the city's fiscal year. And they asked me if I would be willing to do that. And, you know, I had a good working relationship with all the departments within the city. So I was fine and trusted that that's really what was going on. And so I agreed to do so. And they assured me that in June of this year that my contract will be renewed again because I had done a good job for the city. Where that kind of fell out on the floor was in May, I got a notice that they were putting it back out to bid. And there was the company that they were trying, once it went out to bid, they tried to award the contract to MSI, who was just started within that 3-week period where they changed my contract last September.
Well, when you say what do you mean they awarded
several red flags for me? So I also noticed, because it was an open bid, so anyone that wanted to be at the bid opening in June could see the bids from the other companies. I noticed the MSI's bid was not accurate. The rates on there were incorrect. They were not billing for overtime, which is illegal. And I made the purchasing department aware of that, and they said, I asked them point blank, I asked them, will you allow them to change their rates? And he said, no, we will not. Any bidder that has given us invalid information, they're not allowed to change it. Their bid will be thrown out. Well, so it went before the council. The council, first of all, the purchasing department didn't throw their bid out after they recognized that the rates being charged were incorrect. And it went before the council. The council recognized it because I made them aware of it. Nobody else made them aware. HR department, purchasing department, nobody within the city made them aware of how inaccurate the rates being charged to the city were going to be. I made them aware of it. The city council stood up and said, no, we're throwing their bid out. So instead of awarding me the contract that I had bidded on, a 12-month contract with two 12-month renewals, they only awarded me a 3-month contract. And they changed the whole bidding process and put it back out to bid.
So you have the business for 3 months. Is that secure? I mean, that's a fourth of what you originally had. Is that secure?
Right. Well, what I had bid on was for a 12-month contract, and
but you relinquished that voluntarily. You agreed to.
No. This is in June of this past year. That what I'm saying. when I agreed to a shorter term renewal was last September, and then it came up for renewal in June. Instead of renewing my contract, they put it back out to bid. And that's what I'm talking about. All these companies bid on a 12-month contract, and they awarded it to a company, MSI, that had the invalid rates submitted. They threw them out and signed a 3-month agreement with me and put it back out to bid.
So right now, I'm not clear exactly, Rusty Hall of Outsource Staffing, what the situation is now. Right now, do you have the contract, or does MSI?
Put it back out to bid. They changed the whole bidding process. It was a 30-page proposal this time, and they made experience, which my competitor MSI has very little, and they made rates not as important. They put it on a 100-point scale, with experience being 10 points of that 100 points.
What was it before? What was experience before?
It was never looked at.
Well, back up. Hold on, just a second.
So line item bids before.
Okay, so now you're saying now they reduced the value in the rating scale of experience, of which you have a lot, and they made it 10 points. So right. You have 10 points, and the other side has 0 points, or what? What's the effect of that change in experience?
The effect of that change is somebody's wanting MSI to get this contract, so they made it to where they could get it. Because experience was a problem back in June. That was one of the concerns that the council had in June, was this company had a lack of experience.
Well, what would you tell my listener to do or to think about this matter, Rusty Hall? You're the incumbent. Let's say you're the incumbent contractor, and you've had the work for 11 years and as you said, no complaints. That's been your published comment. No one's complained about what you've done, and you win the bid every year. What should my listener think about this, and what if anything should he do?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that the city council has done their job and stood up for what was right twice now, and I just ask that they do it again one more time next Tuesday. And your listeners, I would ask that they just write to their councilman or woman and ask them to do what's right. And what's right is to go with the company that has the experience, that provided the city with good service for 11 years, gave an honest proposal, and will continue to do good service for the city.
Now, let me ask another question
from their constituents.
Let me ask you another question about rescission. There was not an action of rescission by the city. Is that right? That's what I'm not clear about. How did the city back out of a contract? If there's a contract for a year, there has to be.
I signed a contract last week, a 12-month contract last week.
That was signed. Okay.
And then I found out Monday morning in the Times Free Press that they were putting it back out for trying to bring it back up before the city council to, I guess, nullify my contract and split it, or at least try to split it with another company. Well, I'm not sure how you do that after you've already got a signed contract.
Well, if they signed it, if the counterparty signed it and you did, and the contract is binding, then it seems to be that there has to be you have to defend your rights, and it seems like that other side, if it wants to undo the contract, has to have some kind of cause, which would be an action in rescission on their part, saying, well, you've done something wrong and you've ignored the terms of the agreement, therefore that would be you, Rusty Hall, have rescinded it yourself practically, so we're just going to recognize that and have this action in rescission, in which they declare it's rescinded and undone. But there has to be some reason for that. There has to be, I think, a legal basis for a grievance.
No reason for that. None whatsoever.
There has to be a grievance, and there's not one, you're saying?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, thanks, Rusty Hall. And my listener, of course, the man who matters, runs his own business, and your company, again, is Outsource Staffing. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
What's the website?
Staffing LLC.
What's the website?
Outsource-staffing.com.
Outsource Staffing. No, outsource hyphen, probably, right? Is it a hyphen or a dash?
Dash is fine.
Okay. Outsource-staffing.com. Rusty Hall, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
This is David Tulis, and we've been chatting with Rusty Hall, who is the incumbent contractor that has served the city for 11 years with he's a middleman in the labor market, and he has just had a contract with the city for up to $1.8 million in short-term staffing help. And that was effected last week. And then Monday, he says he was told that this agreement is somehow in flux again. It's not an agreement. It's not a contract. It's not a law binding the parties. But somehow it's gotten fuzzy, it's gotten soft, and gotten weak, and it's not effective. And so his question is, well, how is that possible? We have an agreement. There's not a cause on the part of the city to undo the agreement. There's not a violation or a grievance that it has in the purchasing department run by Bonnie Woodward. So how can that be? And so, absent a grievance, absent an action in rescission by the city in acting upon its rights, preserving its rights and filing rescission, how can there be a contract undone? It seems to me that the value of the contract is important, and for us here in Chattanooga to have confidence in the marketplace and in the system of law that we have. Of course, these are equitable arrangements in equity. They're under contract, right? You have private parties agreeing with each other to do something. If the contract is not enforceable as against the city or as against this business outsource staffing, then how can we really have a prosperous and good and growing free market? That is what we're all about here on the David Tulis Show. That is to say, local economy and the free market. Now, I have got a lot to get to, and just want you to know that you've been hearing Rusty Hall. Now, about the question about the Catalan vote, this is a big topic, and I'm afraid I can't do it justice now. But they're all around Europe. Just so you know, there are the same movements, and even in this country, there are parts that want to separate from within states. California has proposed to divide that state into 3 states. And in Europe, as we were reading about Spain and the hope for crack up of that country, there are movements, dissatisfied middle-class people in northern Italy in the Po Valley, and also in the home of Volkswagen. Bavaria is a part of Germany that was well affected for God's glory by the Reformation. And though the Bavarians were subsumed in the greater Germany by the Kaiser, of course, Kaiser is just the German word for Caesar, the Caesar of the German fiefs back in the late 1800s. Bavaria lost its way and became a subject people. There is still, even there at the home of Volkswagen, this ferocious sense of independence, which I think has not died, though I've not read recent reports about that part of the world. That is mentioned. I just, as my source here is the Wall Street Journal story about the Catalan middle class in Spain bringing about this drive for independence. Do we have that here? Do we have in the Chattanooga area people who care enough about self-determination, self-direction, what I like to call it self-government, to think that this is something desirable and something to be pursued? And I would say the answer is probably no. Probably no, until there is more grace in the hearts of the people in the Chattanooga area, and maybe a greater love for God, and particularly His law. I heard reference yesterday at a meeting, a boys group meeting. A man was asking, "Well, what do you know about Psalm 119?" And he didn't want to say that it was all about God's law, the longest book in the Bible about God's law. He said, "Well, the whole book's about God's word." I mean, that's not saying what it's about, right? The whole book is about the law of God, which is summarized in the Ten Commandments. And until we have, I would say, a higher regard for that as a structure, as a grid for civilization, we're not going to have the ideas of self-government that in other countries that have very little Christian influence anymore. They have that idea. They have the idea of self-government. Of course, Christianity is the system that demands self-government. That, because I believe in that person, the Lord Jesus, who had created this whole concept of Christendom, right? Christian civilization. It's fair to call me the biggest pro-government person in Chattanooga. I am very pro-government, which means, of course, that I would probably be against and not in favor of the reigning authorities that we have today that are not about government, but they're about really miscreancy dressed up as government, miscreants, malefactors, misdoers. And the term, since I'm a very gracious man, your host here on the David Tulis Show, I don't like to accuse anybody. So I just say that they are involved in commercial government. That is the term that is appropriate. It is fitting for an academic book about modern government. Is called Commercial Government. And decentralization, though, as Gail Perry is mentioning in Chattanooga.com today, is something coming to Signal Mountain. There's a story that she has in Chattanooga.com about the Signal Mountain School Viability Committee, the SMSVC, that is here making a presentation about whether that city should secede from Hamilton County schools. I would say yes. Generally, secession is better because the closer the operation of the civil magistrate is to the individual, the better people are going to be, especially if they are a moral people, informed by equity. And of course, I say that because the source of equity, right, the source of justice, not egalitarianism, but equity. It's a different thing. The source of real equity is God Himself, and because He is always just, and that concept is summarized in the Ten Commandments, which is, of course, a description of His character and a description of the marching orders for humankind, right? In 10 words, right? Those commandments are 10 words, and they are in the details worked out in the concept of lex talionis, which is eye for eye, tooth for tooth, stripe for stripe, wound for wound, burn for burn, which means to say, if there's a wrong in society, a wrong done by a person, the restoration of that wrong, the making right of it, is to be no worse and no less than the wrong done. Right? There's a restoration. There's the capital punishment on one hand for a crime, or there is restoration. There's no such thing as prisons, no such thing as debtor's prison, which we have in Hamilton County, in many other jurisdictions. The federal government is, of course, our friend. Sparta, Tennessee, SpartaLive.com, the newspaper there has a striking story. You can see a reference to it at our Facebook page. Make sure you like us on Facebook, by the way. The Nooga Radio page, David Tulis, brought to you by Nooganomics.com, Nooganomics.com. The city of Sparta is entering into a contract with the federal government, the Special Operations Command, and it occurred October the 5th, the Sparta Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And here's what we're told by a Mr. Parker, who is a government, a federal government man. Al Parker, yeah, Al Parker is from the SOC, the SOC, Special Operations Command. Basically, this MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, it's like a permission slip. You give me permission to come into your town. I have a couple of sites already on our slate, but we have put the talks in postponement mode. The IMI concrete plant is one of our future sites we want to do. So there's going to be a war that takes place in Sparta, Tennessee. The good people will be having military exercises, training, including surveillance, advanced communication, raids, reconnaissance, convoy, foot movement of soldiers, troops and equipment, drop zone, landing or pickup zone, other helicopter operations, and other required training necessary to develop special operations skills within the boundary of the city of Sparta. That's here in Tennessee. MARSOC intends to conduct training in the city of Sparta on multiple occasions here in Tennessee, restricted specifically to commercial, restaurant, and public gatherings.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4, and